So Elmo is on deserved vacations. So last week we started the aptitude of certain mediums for things they do not know, languages, music, drawing, etc. But we read only the first question. So we are going to start again. I'll ask Philip to read the first two questions and then we'll comment. So because the first one we studied last week.
The aptitude of certain mediums for things they do not know, languages, music, drawing, etc. Spirits only have the language of thought, not articulated speech. Therefore, they use only one language. Thus, a spirit could express itself mediumistically in a language it had never spoken when incarnate. In this case, where does it get the words it uses? You already answered this question by yourself when you said that spirits only have one language, which is that of thought. Everyone understands this language, both humans and spirits. When addressing the incarnate spirit of the medium, the discarnate spirit does not speak in French or English, but in the universal language of thought. In order to translate its ideas into articulated, transmissible language, it utilizes the vocabulary of the medium. Number 16. If that is so, spirits would only express themselves in the medium's language, but we know that they write in languages that are unknown to the medium. Isn't that a contradiction? First, you should realize that not all mediums are equally adept at this type of exercise. Second, spirits only lend themselves to it occasionally when they deem it to be useful. For normal, lengthy communications, they prefer to use a language that is familiar to the medium because it presents them with fewer material difficulties to overcome.
Okay. So the first question here is the communications of the spirits. They happen through thought. Okay, and we study, and Elmo explained that to us several times. So the two perispirits are connected is thought to thought. Even if the spirit doesn't understand that is connecting through thought, the thought is transformed into words that is transmitted by the medium. So the thought is the universal language. Now, once it transforms into words, then it's when the words are in any specific language, according to the vocabulary of the medium. And remember here, we're talking mostly about written communications from the spirit, psychography, right? So the second question Kardec asks, that they write in language that are unknown to the medium. Isn't that a contradiction? And again, if the spirit wants to transmit a communication in a language that the medium does not speak or write, it can do, but it's going to be kind of a struggle. It's going to be difficult. So they are going to use short messages. They are going to use, for normal communications, lengthy communications, they are going to use the language that is familiar to the medium because it presents fewer material difficulties. For the medium to, and we were going to see this in the next questions, if the medium needs to speak that language, needs to know how to write that language, if the medium has, needs to know how to write, he's going to address in the next questions, okay? If you guys have any question, just please ask me. There are very few of us here today, so just raise your hand or call me. Otherwise, we'll continue. Philip, 17.
Doesn't the ability of certain mediums to write in a foreign language prove the fact that they had spoken it in another lifetime and have intuitively retained it in the present one? That could certainly be the case, but it is not the rule. With some effort, a spirit can temporarily overcome material resistance, which can be verified when mediums write in their own language using words unknown to them.
Okay, so here we're talking about psychography, writing, right? Because when we are talking about a psychophony, the medium has to have stored in its memory, the eternal memory of the spirit, the language it's going to communicate. Otherwise, it will be very, very hard for the spirit to communicate in that language that never spoke before, and it will have a lot of difficulties. Now, when we're talking about writing, it is possible that a medium can write in a language he never spoke before, he never wrote anything before, because in the end, you don't speak Japanese or Chinese. And if someone presents you with a text in Chinese or Japanese, then you don't understand anything. You can try to copy what is the figures you see, and you are, let's say, writing in Chinese or Japanese without understanding anything that you are drawing or writing, right? So that's how it's easier to understand the medium being able to write in a language that he hasn't spoken or written in another, which is unknown to them. But again, it's going to be a struggle, because let's say a spirit comes to a medium and wants to give a communication in Russian, which uses the Cyrillic alphabet. If the spirit never wrote anything in Cyrillic and never learned anything about their alphabet, it's going to be, is it possible? Yes, but it's going to be difficult to read, difficult to write, and difficult to read. Of course, when you're talking about, let's say the spirit never spoke Portuguese, the medium never spoke Portuguese in any life, but the communication comes, but the spirit knows how to write, the medium knows how to write French or English, which uses the same alphabet. Makes it easier, because it's just a matter of putting words together and letters and words together, and then the spirit can make the medium do that. It's going to be more difficult, it take more time, but possible. If it's a writing that the medium has no knowledge or previous knowledge of it, it's going to be much harder. But it's not impossible. It's just that the question is, and that's what Kardec is going through, the spirits are going to talk later, is why, right? Why would the spirits would go through so much trouble? And besides being in terms of curiosity for learning for the group, there's not much more sense in reality. And the next one talks about something also that it's easy for us to imagine, right? When a person that doesn't know how to write.
Hey, João.
Yeah.
So there's case when the medium himself or herself speaks more than one language, but when he's writing or giving a psychophony or whatever, he always does in a right language appropriate to the group, because it feels like the message is coming on that appropriate language. So why does that, doesn't happen, like, for example, the medium that has the ability to speak more than one language to address that in a different language, for example?
Not sure I understood the question, Renato.
we always, when we receive the message, we say that the language of the spirit is a thought. There's not a language, it's a thought. But the medium always addressing in the language appropriated to the medium that is there. If it's in Portuguese, if it's Spanish, or whatever.
Yes.
There's no doubt, there's no confusion. It's always, whatever you are. So that's what I'm trying to get. How does that, happen? Because since the medium could speak like in Spanish or in Portuguese or whatever, but always does in the right language, since they thought there's no language wrapping around.
Because you are in a group and surroundings that is everybody is talking in English, and all the communications are in English, so it's kind of an automatic conversion from the thought to English because of the ambient. If you decide to receive a communication, you focus and said, no, this next communication I'm going to receive in Portuguese, you're going to receive it in Portuguese. But it's the word that someone asked me about the other day. What's the union of mind, the union of thoughts, the mental energy? I forgot the word now. Of the group that is going to influence you receiving the message in English.
So you're saying that, for example, in the case of a psychography, if the medium decides, you know what, I'm doing this in, let's say, in Portuguese, he will understand, quote unquote, the message, everything he will listen, quote unquote, in Portuguese. If is a medium's decision?
Yes and no, right? It's a medium's decision. If the medium decides that it wants to do in another language, it can. But you work in a group, so you are going to work in the environment of the group and in the energies of the group. So the protecting spirits that are there guiding, also the communicating spirits, they are going to direct the spirit to transmit these thoughts in the language that the group is using at the meeting. Okay, but yes, you can, if you decide to do it in Portuguese, you are going to receive it in Portuguese because you are focusing your attention. I mentioned this as an example of that guy that participated in our first mediumship meetings, right, in 2001 when we started. The guy that was from Rio, he was here for 6 months, and he asked to participate in our mediumship meetings, and he said, but I never did anything in English. I'm going to receive all my communications in Portuguese. And we said, fine. And he received all the communications in English. It was psychophony. He never wrote any. He was a medium of psychophony. So, but every communication he received during the 3-4 months he was with us, all of them are in English. And he was surprised himself.
I didn't know that. That's nice.
Yeah. It was very, very funny. The first meeting that he joined us, he said, oh, but I'm going to receive all my communications in Portuguese because I never receive any communication in English. And we said, fine, we're just starting. So it was a training for everybody. And then the first communication comes and he starts talking English, and I was always in English. Okay.
But João, did he speak English before or no? He knew how.
No, he was here. He was here doing a course. So he was 6 months here. So he spoke English. It's not, if he didn't speak English, it would be impossible. But he spoke English. He was going every day to classes and doing everything in English. It's just that he thought that because he never participated in a mediumistic meeting in English, that he wouldn't be able to communicate in English. He wasn't comfortable with the idea of communicating in English. And, everything came out in English.
And I see Carol laughing, Carol laughing so much. You think it's funny.
I mean, you just never know. I mean, there's all sort of spiritual assistance that may be orchestrated it or assisted. So I don't know. It's always an amazing thing. You never know. You just You just never know.
You know, but next question shows one of the challenges here, Philip.
18. Could a person who does not even know how to write do so as a medium? Yes, but you must understand that there is a great mechanical difficulty to overcome because the hand is not used in the movements required to form letters. The same applies to painting mediums who do not know how to draw.
So can a person that doesn't know how to write receive a psychography? The Spirit says yes, but it's hard. Why it's hard? The hand of the medium is not used to write. He never wrote. So it's not used to the movements that are necessary to produce writing. So that's why it creates a great mechanical difficulty. That's what the spirits are telling us here. The hand is not used to the movements required to form letters, like you know, the painting mediums, right? They need to have some basic knowledge of painting to make things easier. They don't need to be painters per se, but they need to know at least the basics of painting to make the work easy. Again, if you have 3 mediums in a group, 2 know how to write and 1 doesn't, the spirits won't choose the one that doesn't know how to write to communicate, unless it's an emergency. There is only one and there's nothing else. So they can't force the medium to write, but it's going to be a short message with a very difficult to read calligraphy, because the medium doesn't know how to write. You know, you ask someone that doesn't know how to ride a bike to go to you know, 3 blocks down to pick up something for you, and the only way they can go is with a bike. There is no other way. Are they going to go? Yes, they're going to push the bike. They're going to try to mount the bike and fall. They're going to do it, but it's going to be a struggle. They will end up, you know, maybe hurting themselves or maybe pushing the bicycle back and forth. It's the same thing with writing and painting, right? If the medium doesn't know how to, it's going to be very hard, and the spirits are probably not going to do it. In the times of Kardec, you have many more people who didn't know how to write and read and write, right? Nowadays, it's so much less people that that wouldn't even be the case, because all, you know, the mediums will know how to read and write. Okay. Right?
Me?
Yes.
19. Could a medium of very low intelligence transmit communications of an elevated order? Yes, for the same reason that a medium can write in an unknown language. Mediumship per se does not depend on intelligence or moral qualities. In the absence of a better instrument, a spirit can use whatever one is at hand. However, for communications of a certain order, it is natural that it will prefer the medium who offers it the fewest material obstacles. There is a further consideration. Mentally impaired individuals are only so because of the imperfection of their brain. Since their spirit may be more advanced than one might think, you have proof of this through some evocations of living and dead mentally impaired persons. This is a fact borne out by experience. Many times we have evoked the spirits of living mentally impaired individuals who provided patent proof of their identity and answered us in a very sane and even superior manner. Their impaired state is a punishment for the spirit who suffers because of the constraint under which it finds itself. Mentally impaired mediums can thus sometimes offer a spirit who wants to manifest greater resources than one might think. See La Revue Spirit, July 1860, article Phenology and Physiognomy.
Physiognomy. Yeah. Well, this book was written, was translated before we had the Spiritist Review published. Right now we have the published review. So in July 1860, you can look at there. So the same applies with a medium of very low intelligence, being able to write messages of an elevated nature, because the medium just needs to know how to write. From the medium, it comes from the spirit. So this anything that he wants to write. You lost me for a moment or no?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Because my connection got cut and then came back. So the medium, the medium does only have to have the ability to write. Everything else comes from the spirit. And you have, of course, Chico Xavier. He was not of low intelligence. He was he was intelligent enough. But when he was asked in that program that Luis just mentioned, Pinga Fogo, about the book Evolution in Two Worlds and Mechanisms of Mediumship, which are very complex books. How did he write those books? He said, I find it hard to understand those books. I just transmitted what the Spiritist wanted to say, right? So it doesn't really matter the intelligence of the medium. As long as the medium knows how to write, the spirits can produce the message. If you have a mentally challenged medium, right? Can they transmit? Yes, they can. Of course, there will be difficulties because the discipline, the focus, the concentration of a mentally challenged person can be difficult at a time. So it may be very difficult for the spirit to use this type of mediums to communicate. But remember, like Kardec says here in the comment, that the mentally challenged is the physical body, not the spirit. So when the communication comes perispirit to perispirit, the perispirit of the mentally challenged spirit individual is not mentally challenged. The connection, the physical body is the one that have difficulty to process and transmit. So with that we can understand a little bit how this works, right? Okay.
Number 20.
Yep.
How can we explain the aptitude of certain mediums to write in verse in spite of their poetic ignorance? Poetry is a language in itself. They can write in verse just as they could write in an unknown language. Furthermore, they could have been poets in a previous existence. As I have already stated, acquired knowledge is never lost by spirits who must reach perfection in all areas. Thus, without their realizing it, what they knew in the past provides them an ease that they do not possess in the normal state.
Okay, so here, when we talk about poems and verse, we can bring Francisco Xavier again, right? The first ever book that he published and received from the spirits was a book of poems by, I don't know how many, 30, 40 different poets, that it's called Parnassus of Beyond the Grave. And it's not translated into English, of course, because it's a book of poems is not very easy to translate. So we would have not have much interest and demand here. But of course, when the book came, Chico was 22 years old or 25 years old, something like that. It was a shock, right? You imagine the academy in Brazil was really up in arms because he received the most famous poets, Brazilian poets, were there in the book. And they were utterly confused because the style of the poems of each poet reflected the style of the poet. But, you know, of course, what happens? There is, when you have, let's say, a poem written by a poet that is in the spiritual world, there are two components here. There is some type of influence of the medium, right? Because it's thought to thought, and then the medium put it in its own words. So, of course, it's not 100% like the poet wanted to write, imagine the poem. That's one thing. And the second thing, the poet itself has changed when it discarnated, went back to the spiritual world, acquired more knowledge, more understanding, and may have changed slightly their style because of their changes in their evolutionary path. So for someone, let's say, that is a connoisseur of the poet, and you know, they will read the poem and they would say, yes, it's in the style, it's very similar, but it's not the real poet, it's a copy. And it's sometimes they'll say it's not a good copy, it's a bad quality copy, it's a bad poem, things like that, because for them it was very difficult to accept that it was coming from the poet themselves through someone that had barely completed secondary school, right? So Chico faced a lot of trouble in the beginning because of this book, and it caused a lot of other things that we discussed here. Even the brother X, Humberto de Campos, that the family went to the courts to claim rights for the publication of to receive royalties for the books, and the courts didn't allow the family to receive royalties. But then Humberto de Campos decided to start publishing under the pseudonym of Brother X, not to allow the family to claim anything on his work. Anyway, so it's going back. You can write poems, right? I never wrote a poem in my life. If I'm a medium and the spirit dictates a poem, I'm going to write it. It's just words, right? Putting words together. Is it going to be great? Probably not, but I can do it. You know, Jussara, who's a medium and receives poems, actually has received many poems. They have a different quality because she likes poetry. She writes poetry herself, so it's easier for her to receive poetry, right? But so that's the poetry. It's basically the same concepts, right? If a medium can write, he can write poems.
João, I don't remember if I read or if I hear some lecture, I don't know, that in terms of poetry, because of the language is a more it's difficult, sublime, or whatever you want to say. It's not that it requires, but for the lack of a better word, requires a medium with a more elevated, like, moral qualities in order to be translated in the way that, you know, it makes sense, the poem. And that's why we see mediums, you know, writing messages all the time, but it's hard to see them to write a poem, right?
Yeah. If you have a knowledge, it always helps, right? Because if you have the understanding, if you can be a better vehicle of transmission of the thoughts and other ideas of the spirit, it's going to produce a better result. You know, if someone doesn't know how to has the basic writing skills of elementary school, and it's trying to write a scientific article, it's going to be a struggle, right? It'll be much easier for a medium that has scientific knowledge. So the same applies with poems, but it doesn't. It's not impossible, right? It's not undoable in a sense.
Yeah, I'm not saying that, you know, that a medium that's of psychography cannot write. I'm saying that not many mediums are, you know, have that moral quality on the level to do that. For example, you said she could write out of the bed was born because it's a high elevated spirit. Not a high elevated spirit, but you know, comparing to us, he's more elevated. You mentioned Jusara, that's working for 300 years with spiritism. So not many people does that. Even in our group, you see that poems is a rare thing. And I was thinking through that, you know, it's a working process for us.
Yeah, but you know, Renato, you've been receiving psychography for some time. I'm sure you can receive a poem. You know, and I eventually will. I'm not saying it's going to be. Maybe you won't find it great because the beginning is always difficult, right? But there's nothing. You can write, you can receive messages, so you can receive a poem. The quality is a different story. We are not here to discuss the quality, but can you receive a poem? Yes, you can. Of course, you can.
Yeah.
Okay. Next, Philip.
21. Does the same apply to those who display a special aptitude for drawing and music? Yes, drawing and music are also forms for expressing thought, and spirits use instruments that offer them the most ease.
Yeah, read the next one. It's a continuation.
Does the expression of thought through poetry, drawing, or music depend solely on the aptitude of the medium or also on that of the communicating spirit? Sometimes the medium, sometimes the spirit. Highly evolved spirits possess all aptitudes, whereas less evolved ones have limited knowledge.
So, more of this of what we were discussing here, right? When we talk about those that have a special aptitude for drawing and for music, in the end, they are forms of expressing thoughts, right? And of course, if a spirit has different mediums available, they are going to choose the mediums that are more able to produce this type of phenomena of music or of drawing, right? The second question, you have to read and reread because it's not very clear, because the thought that comes through poet, drawing, or music depends on the aptitude of the medium or also that of the communicating spirit. In the end, the aptitude belongs to both, right? Sometimes the spirits answer, sometimes the medium, sometimes the spirit. And then they move completely away from the question, say highly evolved spirits possess all aptitudes where less evolved ones have limited knowledge. In the end, it depends on the communication depends on both, right? There will be no communication without a medium. The spirit can want to communicate. If there's no medium, there's no way to communicate. And a medium cannot express anything without a spirit. If a spirit is not present to communicate, there is no communication. So in the end, it depends on both. And it applies to everything: poet, drawing, music, written communications, psychography. And of course, the more evolved spirits are going to have better aptitudes and better ways of expressing their thoughts and their knowledge, limited to the ability of the medium to express them. Many times Jussara says that the thoughts that came were much more beautiful than she was able to express in words or in writing, right? Because you feel that the sublime approximation of the more evolved spirits, and the thoughts are sublime, but you don't have the vocabulary to express these sublime thoughts for lack of words or lack of knowledge in the language to express them. So in the end, that's why sometimes she says that what came to her mind was much more beautiful than what she was able to write. Okay.
João.
Yes. Can
Oh, sorry, go
sorry,
ahead.
Renato. Carol raised her hand.
Yes, if a medium were a mechanical medium, would the spirit be more evolved to go through them in order for that mechanical medium to ease through the communication? Or is it even on both sides, no matter what?
Doesn't make any difference.
It
The
doesn't, okay.
mediumship, yeah, the mechanical medium, they are a better filter of the communication, right? But in the medium, the only difference is that the mechanical medium, it doesn't go through the rational brain of the medium, physical brain, but it's still goes through the perispirit of the medium that will have to express itself. So it has the limitation. It's not 100% of the thought of the spirit communicating, because it has to go through perispirit to perispirit of the medium, and then it goes directly to the hand if it's a psychography, right? So that's that's because we think that it goes directly from the spirit communicating to the hand. No, it goes through the perispirit of the medium. It doesn't go on, the medium, the communicating spirit cannot control the hand of the medium. It has to go through the perispirit, right? Of the medium.
Oh, that's right. I hadn't thought about that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for clarifying, John. Thank you.
Renato.
Yeah, in terms of music, because so far I only see, a piano, a line of a more classical terms of music, but we know, for example, in Brazil, you have the candomblé and umbanda. They also have a music, and it's something more tribal, more with African roots. So, is there I don't know, is there a line of music that is played, that's put away on spiritism, or it accommodates any kind of music?
The music from the superior spirits is a music of an elevated nature. The best elevated nature music we know here is classical music, right? In terms of our limited knowledge. So we can imagine that the music of the spirits is something from there to better. But popular music, it's a form of music also that is used, and the more evolved spirits probably would not use or they wouldn't disapprove of anything. It's just they won't use because it's not their music, right? So music, it's not something that is very well, there's a lot of spiritist centers in Brazil that use music, right? And few here also in the U.S. They have groups of chorus that sings musics, and I particularly I think some of them are of the doubtful taste. I think they are too much focused on the religious and less sublime and more religious. But again, people seem to enjoy and seem to join in the music. So if you look at if you go to a spiritist center in Brazil, or if you watch some of the online, they will have music in the beginning, in the end, and you have some beautiful music also. So I don't know if I know how to answer the question, to be very honest, Renato.
Yeah, that's a tough one, because I was trying to make a parallel with psychophony and psychography, that we have different levels of spirits communicating. In terms of music and painting and drawings, that's more of a elevate spirit, as you say. So, and makes sense. An elevate spirit's not gonna do some more of a with drums or stuff like that. It will be more of a in the classical line. So
Yeah.
I think in terms of spiritism, that line of expression, let's put that way, it's more used by elevate spirit than not so more elevate spirits. That's why we only see on the line, not only, but more often for classical style, not something more popular, as you say.
Yeah, and I actually, the question I asked when Glaucio gave a lecture on music at the beginning of this month or the end of last month. I asked him, but we still consider the classical music as to be the more elevated music, but don't we have any modern music that is more aligned with the spiritual world? And he didn't have the answer. So I imagine that modern music, in terms of some types of modern music, are also called sublime music. But I still, when I think of sublime music, I still go back to classical music. I don't, I like a lot of modern music, a lot of the different types of music. But if you think of when someone says, "Oh, let's play some sublime music," you go back to the basics, right? The classics.
Thank you.
Okay, last question, Philip.
23. Why do individuals who are gifted with a great talent in one existence not possess it in the next one? That is not always the case, for often such individuals perfect in one existence what they had begun in the previous one. Nevertheless, it could be that a superior faculty lies dormant for a certain amount of time in order to facilitate the development of another. It will be a latent seed that will later germinate again, but there will always be some visible signs of it, or at least a vague intuition.
Yeah, this question, it's an example I use many times, and you heard me talking a lot of times about Mozart, right? The Mozart in his next incarnation wouldn't come with the great talent of a musician, because if he did, he would be again a genius in music and not develop anything else. So sometimes we come into an incarnation with a faculty that is lying dormant. It's not present in that incarnation. It's always on the intellectual side. On the moral side, everything always comes with us. But on the intellectual side, if we need to develop in different areas, we are going to, if we excel in one area, we may not bring that area, the ability to exercise that that talent in that area in an incarnation. So what the spirits say, they bring at least some visible signs or at least a vague intuition. So Mozart, of course, would love music and will feel great listening to music, maybe his own music, right? But he would not have the ability to compose or to play instruments, maybe something like that, because that would prevent him from developing on the areas that he needs to develop. But the intuition is there, and it's not that he lost it. It's everything stored in the spirit, in the immortal spirit. It's just not brought to the incarnation, to the present incarnation. Okay. Okay. So let's do one more item here, and then we stop here.
224?
Yeah.
Undoubtedly, a communicating spirit understands all languages because they are forms for expressing thought, and the spirit understands through thought. In order to transmit this thought, however, it requires an instrument, the medium. The medium's soul, who receives the spirit's communication, can only transmit it through the bodily organs. Thus, for transmitting in an unknown language, these organs do not have the flexibility they possess for the familiar language. A medium who only knows how to speak in French could accidentally give a response in English, for example, if the spirit so wills. However, spirits who find human language already too slow in comparison to the speed of thought, and therefore they try to abbreviate a language as much as possible, become impatient with the mechanical resistance of the transmission, and that is why they do not always attempt it. This is also the reason why novice mediums who write painfully and slowly, even in their own language, usually only receive brief responses that are not fully developed. This is also why spirits recommend that only simple questions be asked by such novices. For farther reaching questions, a developed medium is required who offers no mechanical resistance to the spirit. We would not choose a student who was just learning to spell to read a text for us. A good worker does not like to use low-quality instruments. Let us add another highly important consideration regarding foreign languages. Endeavors in this area are always done out of curiosity with the purpose of experimentation, and nothing is more unpleasant to spirits than the proofs to which some individuals try to submit them. Highly evolved spirits never lend themselves to this, and they depart from those who intend to enter into such a path. They love serious and useful subjects as much as they loathe concerning themselves with useless and purposeless ones. Disbelievers will say that this is nevertheless a useful aim for convincing them in that it could result in winning adherents for the cause of the spirits. In response, the spirits state, our cause does not need those who are so proud as to deem themselves indispensable. We call ourselves those whom we want and who are always the humblest and most unassuming. Did Jesus perform wonders for the scribes when they asked him to? And what kind of individuals did he use to revolutionize the world? If you want to convince yourselves, you have other means than through demands. Start by submitting yourselves to the facts. It is not normal for students to impose their will upon their master. The result of this is that, except for a few exceptions, mediums transmit spirits' thoughts through the available mechanical means, and the expression of this thought could and should be often affected by the imperfection of such means. Thus, uncultured individuals will say that most beautiful things and express the most elevated and philosophical thoughts in an uncultured manner. For as we know, for spirits, the thought means more than everything else. This answers the objection of certain critics as to incorrectness of style and spelling, which they would blame the spirits for, but which could be attributed to either the mediums themselves or the spirits. It is not worthwhile to dwell on such matters, and it is no less childish to want to point out such incorrectness with minute precision as we have sometimes witnessed. We should correct it without any scruples unless it is characteristic of the communicating spirit, in which case it will be useful to retain as proof of identity. Hence, for example, we have seen a spirit always write jewel, lacking the S, when referring to its grandson, because during its lifetime, it wrote it like that, although the grandson, who served as its medium, knew perfectly well how to spell his own name.
Okay. So this long dissertation here by Kardec talks about the communications, and it's a little bit more of what we discussed here, right? That the communications that it's affected by the quality of the medium and the knowledge of the medium, because it's in the end it comes through thought. So the medium will use their own words and their own knowledge or lack of knowledge to transmit the communication. So the more difficult the medium has to express him or herself, if it's a novice medium, the smaller will be the communication, the shorter will be the communication, because the spirits, you know, they are not going to spend a lot of time with the mediums that are not able to express. So that's why in the beginning, sometimes we see when mediums are start to developing, they write just some disconnected words, some disconnected sentences, because it's the training of connection, and still the connection is not there. So for more serious communications, they will look for mediums, more experienced mediums, right? You know, then Kardec goes on the disbelievers here, that those that do not believe that communications come from the spirits, why don't the spirits show to us? And it's the same, right? The spirit says that we don't need you to believe. You make your own choices. You find your own answers. We don't need you to believe that we exist or don't exist, and that we can communicate or not communicate, right? So, and then in the end talks a little bit about style, right? Spelling, and which is something that we discussed also, which is you are limited by the ability of the medium to communicate, and the style and spelling. And one thing that he says here in the end, which is, you know, Renato, you receive the communications you always gave to me for me to read, and sometimes I make some corrections, because exactly what he says here, we should correct it without any scruples, unless it's a characteristic of the communicating spirit, right? So it's unless it's something that the spirit wants to communicate in that form, like the jewel here without the S, the jewels. You know, the medium is never perfect. So the communication, we need to read it and correct, and you know, the medium itself is the first one, himself or herself is the first one to read and to make sure that it's understandable and it makes sense, right, before sending to others. So that was it. Any questions, comments here? Okay, Carol, you do the final prayer for us?
Infinite Creator, all goodness and grace, we are grateful to be together this evening for our study of the Medium's book, the chapter being Aptitude of the Mediums. We are grateful for what we have received and what we have learned. May we give thanks to our spiritual benefactors, the good spirits, the mentors who are with us, and we give thanks to our teachers who have been able to impart this knowledge. May we continue throughout the week with our prayers, with our studies, with our mindfulness, and may we always be open to giving the gift in return. May we help others along the way. May we be more kind. Maybe we be more open. Maybe we listen more intently. We are grateful for all the blessings that we have received, and may we continue throughout the week with our prayers, with our studies, and with our mindfulness. As we close our meeting this evening, may we receive the love, light, and peace of Christ within our hearts and within our minds. May we do the best each and every day, continuing with our hearts open and our minds also steady, even, and focused. We close now and humbly ask for safety and protection as we go forth to family, friends, loved ones, and coworkers. May we remind ourselves to be beacons of light, go forth in peace and in gratitude. So be it.